I'm Leora. I'm a DevOps architect in Red Hat.
Ah, okay. Yeah, it's somehow ring a bell. I've seen your name somewhere before, certainly.
Are you from Red Hat?
No. But somewhere on the internet, maybe, or maybe
Right.
just going through the meeting minutes of this call.
Oh,
I mean, that would be the most logical thing. Yeah, I'm with Ericsson. I'm in the Ericsson OSPO, so a former colleague of Ericsson. Yes, no, Fatih. That's what I wanted to say. So this is why I know him, and I've way too few times attended this call, even though Fatih kind of invited me to that. I'm currently trying to focus on supply chain security, trying to get some folks internally kind of going. I'm spending most of my time around the OpenSSF though, like at least trying to follow what's happening there. But yes, there are plenty of places these days that look at supply chain security, and yeah, it's hard to follow all of them, but it's always interesting.
It is. Actually, also tried like way before at the beginning of when the SIG just formed. I looked into it. I think it's tightly coupled with Tecton, if I'm not mistaken. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
You mean the SIG?
The OpenSSF, what they're doing.
No, I wouldn't say the Tecton is a fundamental part of that. They just try to.
Maybe, sorry to interrupt you, Georg. Maybe,
yeah,
are you referring to Secure Software Factory, Leora?
Maybe
SSF,
I'm mixing here stuff. Apologies.
Yeah.
Good one,
Sorry.
good one, Fatih. Yeah, no, that's confusing naming. I was referring to the Open Source Security Foundation, the OpenSSF. And SSF for some time has been a part of it. And now it's called Fresca, I think, right? To make it a bit less confusing.
Yeah, factory for reputable something artifacts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting topic. My own knowledge is almost zero in those areas right now. I don't know if it's related, but I am trying to right now working on how to connect the GitHub Runner or GitHub Actions with the AWS with the authentication. Is that something that is related to supply chain security, or it's unrelated at all? What do you think, George?
I think it is related. So many things are related, but I think this is part of the trustworthiness of your the build process, right? So, like on that level, I would say there is certainly a connection. You should have trust in your build environment, and authenticating your runners that you connect to your CI pipeline somehow relates to that, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for your feedback.
Well, or as a kind of, what do the others think? And the question is, why? Yes, well, is this a topic you'd like to bring up here on this call? I'm just curious as to why you mentioned that.
First of all, by the way, I like David, who was appointed to be the lead. Fatih, if I'm describing it in the wrong way, please correct me.
Yeah, he is now the co-chair with you.
Oh, chair. Yes. A co-chair.
Yeah.
I'm also a co-chair, but I was a long time away from CDF for personal reasons, so I'm a little bit out of sync. And David is a new co-chair, and I had hoped that he will join and will lead this discussion. So I don't have like a formal agenda right now. This is something that I will need to discuss with him in the background, but maybe we can do a roundtable, and maybe, like George, you've mentioned that you want to discuss the topic of supply chain security. So this is something that we can put on the agenda for next discussions, or we can do a discussion here as well during this meeting, and just to collect your ideas. Because we don't have a formal agenda, I'm just trying to find something that will make this meeting valuable enough for all of us. So does it make sense to do a round table? First, do you want to add, first of all, introduce yourself and maybe to provide some feedback?
Sure. I just want to confirm, this is the supply chain for CDF meeting, right? I'm not in the wrong one.
Right.
Okay, perfect.
No.
Yeah, so I've been in these meetings in the past. I think we did a couple presentations. Hi, I'm Parth. I work for a startup, a supply chain security startup called Kusari, and we're working on multiple different projects in the open source. One is called Fresca, which is a secure build, kind of what what George was mentioning in terms of like how supply chain security is looked at, is like, okay, how are you ensuring that your build process is secure, right? So we handle that kind of stuff. And then also another big project called Guac, which is more on the observability piece. It's like, okay, can you, now that you have all this SBOMs and attestations and so forth being generated during your build process, can you actually visualize all this and make connections and utilize that, all this metadata to make policies that you can use to run for your runtime environment in the future, right? Can you make sure, like, if you're running something, it meets all the criterias, such as like your transitive dependencies or your direct dependencies don't have critical CVEs that could be blocking it. It has proper attestations associated with it. It's signed by people you trust or organizations you trust and so forth. So that's some of the things that we're working on. So last time, I know before Fatih was leading, is like, I did show off Fresca, so I would be happy, during the next meeting or so forth to show off Guac. I don't think I have in this meeting, so if people are interested, I can show that piece off.
Sounds interesting to me. Any objections?
No objections.
No objections.
I would also
That's
be
it.
interested. So.
The majority decided to see a presentation. So perhaps we can
Awesome.
coordinate that presentation in the background, if that's okay
Perfect.
with you. So
Sounds good.
where are you based in which geography?
So I am in Michigan for the time being, and then moving back to the East Coast. So it's still all Eastern time zone, and yeah, the whole company is basically remote. So a lot of us are like all over the place. My co-founders are in Connecticut, New York, and like mostly East Coast based at this point. But yeah.
Okay, if I didn't mention, I'm from Israel, by the way.
Okay, nice to meet you.
And I'm working at Red Hat as a DevOps architect.
Got it. Okay.
From engineer, DevOps, I'm a little bit
Yes.
confused with the terminology lately. So this is why I've asked over the Slack channel, my question, because I'm a bit confused. So I don't know what to put in, to describe to my colleagues and to put in my LinkedIn. It's just like, I don't know. So, okay, so we want to discuss and to present the supply chain security stuff. Are there any other topics that might interest you in your line of work, and what's, what's bugging you, what's missing out there, or technologies that you're interested in? I can raise a topic if you want to.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, so one of the topics that I've noticed that are like for in my area that is missing is managing the runners that we are using. If you're using GitLab runners, CI runners, or GitHub runners, because the shared ones or the managed one that are provided by the the service itself is not secured enough, or it doesn't fit our needs. In most cases, this is the problem, right? That if you're working with a certain cloud, you don't want to share your creds with the service itself. Then you want to maintain your own runners in your cloud to give those credentials, you know, there are all kinds. I'm working with AWS, so I don't know if you're aware of this technique of attaching an IAM role to an instance, and then if you're running something inside of this this instance, then everything that is all the authorization that is provided for the IAM role is immediately adopted by the workloads that are running inside of that instance. So if you're hosting your runners, your self-managed runners on top of inside of that kind of an instance, then you're like, you don't need to distribute credentials and to use them in the, you know, all kinds of variables inside the service itself. Like, I don't feel comfortable to share our credentials, and it's also a static way. So if there is a leakage, in order to do a rotation, you need to revoke the current credentials, you need to generate new ones, and you need someone to go to the service variables section and to just put them there. And that is like a bit of a problem in a secure supply chain, from my point of view. Any thoughts on that? Are you working with cloud providers like AWS, GCP, Azure in your line of work?
Yeah, so what we do is that we have our own, so we use Tecton underneath. So we don't have to deal with having our own runners. So we can control the whole environment, basically spin up, you know, how it does, right? It just spins up the ephemeral environment, and then it does whatever it needs to and destroys everything, right? So we hadn't have to worry about in terms of like how we would pass, like storing the actual keys and so forth, right? We are utilizing like, you know, we spin it up, we spin up the environment, and we use like, for example, we use Vault or another, you know, key management system kind of thing to pull in the keys that it needs at the time that it needs it. And then we actually utilize Spiffy Spire. And so that, I'm not sure if you're aware of what that project is, but it's another open source project, but it provides short-lived certificates also. So it has the ability to validate using OIDC to validate, like, okay, so for example, Tecton Chains needs to sign something. So it needs to pull out a specific key from the vault or KMS. It can authenticate itself using this short-lived certificate and grab this public key, usually, and then actually not even pull out the actual keys. So there's another plugin called Transitive plugin. I forget the exact name for it, but that's part of Vault. So that what happens is actually the key never actually leaves Vault, and actually uses that to sign your images and so forth, whatever kind of artifact you want. So that's how we get around all this. So we're not really relying on like IAM policies and so forth. We're kind of just, you know, utilizing short-lived certificates and kind of just managing everything ourselves, so that we have confidence that we're not, you know, we have confidence that we can keep rotating the certificates around. They're short-lived, even if they get stolen, doesn't matter. It's invalidated after the pipeline is kind of done running, kind of thing. So that's how we're doing it. And then not to mention that the actual integration with the key piece, in terms of it never leaving Vault, right? You don't have to worry about it actually getting exposed anywhere, because it's actually never actually leaving any kind of, you know, the key management system or Vault itself.
Interesting. One of the topics that I've noticed in my team about Tecton is the lack of interface with the. We are working with GitLab, but I think it's the same for GitHub as well. The lack of integration with the PR or MR. So, you know, like the triggering part and sharing the information and all those cool features that can control the triggering, retriggering part of the pipelines, you know, stuff like that, that you can do from the interface of a PR, which are like with Tecton is a bit of an issue.
So we're trying to solve that problem.
Them?
Yes.
How do you do that?
So that's what we're trying to work on right now, and we are solving that problem basically. So you can automatically trigger it. You can automatically trigger it based on your PR or your, you know, merge request, whatever it is. and it will automatically pull in your code and do all the work for you, and then give you some kind of status and output back into your actual issue and so forth, and block it if it's doesn't work and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's the piece we're working on.
We had also in our team did some work, they were using the GitLab API, but it's a little bit limited, and it's also because of the architecture of GitLab. It required us to, on every repo, we needed to deploy a specific user for the forks in order to have permissions to query the upstream repo.
Got
So
it.
you
Okay.
needed like a specific service account, like that have permissions on the upstream repo, so that when you're running the pipeline, it has the permissions, and it's like a little bit, the user experience wasn't that great. That's
Right. Okay.
So
Makes sense.
the folks decided to ditch Tekton in favor of GitLab CI.
Makes sense.
George, which orchestration tool are you using in your pipelines? You're muted.
Right. The kids just showed up. Sorry. So I muted and forgot to unmute. Yeah, that's a tricky question with a very hand-wavy answer from my end. I'm personally not working with pipelines myself, to be honest. As I'm working in the open source program office, I'm unfortunately way too abstract sometimes mostly to actually deal with that. Across Ericsson, I guess we use all of the tools, but then again, Fatih might be still, based on his prior experience, have a way better insight, being our former CI/CD CI/CD expert in that regard. So yeah, as I said, it's not a very surprising or not very satisfying answer from my end.
Thank you. Fatih doesn't feel very well, so we don't want to bother him right now.
Yeah, I can
bother him.
Yeah, Jenkins, Spinnaker, I think these are documented on different publications as well, like Jenkins, Spinnaker, and I think Argo is there as well. So like it's pretty similar. The technology stack used for pipelines are pretty similar to other organizations. The biggest difference, that is what actually resulted Ericsson to contribute to CDF, is this event protocol, which has been developed by Ericsson and open sourced like around 2016. Now that work is actually done, like that experience is being contributed to CDF under CD Events project and SIG Events project, SIG Events group. So because when you use multiple pipelines, we have this issue with interoperability and so on, and that's perhaps the higher level than the pipeline engines underneath. So that's something I can highlight as something different than the traditional CI/CD pipelines.
Okay. Yeah. Are there any other topics that you would like to discuss, raise, to suggest? Do you want to suggest what do we want to achieve, or what will be our goal for 2023 in this SIG? Fatih, you probably have the best context, because you were the co-chair like last year, and you have like.
Yeah, I think we start discussing what should we be doing during 2022 when we formed the SIG, but like over time we didn't do, like I also am personally responsible, we didn't do a good job to create some kind of roadmap. Maybe this could be a potential topic for the next meeting, saying, okay, we have this SIG in place for about a year now, and there are lots of other opportunities and communities working on this topic, like OpenSSF and CNCF. Maybe we can work on some kind of roadmap as SIG to document what we want to achieve, like summarize the work they've been doing with, Fresca and Guac. So those things could perhaps be referred in it, so we avoid duplicating efforts and instead use those things as a basis, because that was the idea when we first formed this SIG last year as well. It was called Secure Software Factory at that time, and we were thinking of looking into Secure Software Factory from CD perspective. So long story short, I think having a topic to discuss what to do to 2023, what should be the roadmap, would be a good thing to discuss.
Yeah, and I think that the first, maybe from my point of view, and I think that I already asked that, but maybe now I will like a little bit like ask the same question in different way. Like, what, George and Parth, what do you want to achieve in this SIG? For like in participating in those meetings, or any effort that will come up, like what do you want to get from, what value do you want to receive from the SIG? So, and I think that we can build the roadmap around the needs of the participants. That makes sense to me, but I'm looking for comments and feedback from others.
I think personally, I think I'm interested in CD events, right? CD events and cloud events, in terms of how that all how that would integrate together with some of the tools that are being used in supply chain security, and just maybe kind of fleshing that out more.
Like the CDF events that are currently starting to form for AMP. I've seen somewhere that that they're starting to collect how do you call it, not CVF, CSPs, you know, like
Oh no, that is the conference. What we are discussing, Liora, is the project under CDF called CD events.
my
Yeah, let me put the link. Yeah, CD events is a project that aims to create event specification for continuous delivery, and they are they've been focusing on the basic core events around continuous integration and continuous delivery, and there have been some conversations around like if supply chain security related events could be created, made part of CD events and vice versa type of discussion. So yeah, apart, I think that is a good topic to discuss as well. Then we can go back and provide feedback to project and perhaps contribute to their efforts bringing these things to CD events.
Yep, exactly.
So I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. I don't have this background yet of all the other SIGs in CDF. So apologize for that. I will look into the material and a little bit, you know, skim the information. Thank you, George.
Yeah, I'd be, so as I said, the reason, or maybe, I don't know if I mentioned that, I'm looking at this supply chain security topic right now from a relatively high level and broad perspective. And my primary goal is to build a good understanding of what's happening across the various communities, projects, and initiatives that are ongoing. And just to add to the proliferation of things, what I have in mind is, as I'm like an OSPO person, we have had discussions in the to-do group, you may or may not know, which is like a Linux Foundation initiative geared towards people in OSPOs and open source program offices, wondering like how the to-do group can consume the good information and solutions that are being developed in the various, let's say, content-focused or solution-focused communities like CDF, like the OpenSSF and other places, and create material that is useful for OSPO people to consume. Because based on my experience, when I look at that problem, so to say, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of pressure on organizations to deliver secure software. And you may also know about all the discussions and the regulatory discussions around, okay, do consumers of open source software, like the large companies, do they need to take more responsibility to support the sustainability of the open source ecosystem, right? By kind of contributing more to the projects, helping and not pushing, not demanding, but helping them to adopt better security posture and so on and so forth. And an OSPO, I think, is, at least in my company, a place that needs to realize this and try to drive this down into the organizations, into development organizations that do not necessarily have that on their radar. They primarily like to consume open source, leech it, and push out projects. So that's like this, as I said, the very broad picture. How does that relate to this? Well, this is a supply chain, in parentheses, security focused group with a specific focus on CD, and that is very important. So from that perspective, I'd be interested in best practices, in references. I don't want to necessarily call it reference architectures, these kind of things, but stuff that is valuable to kind of show to internal folks, or to invite them to kind of join this activity and kind of broaden their typically very much internal focused horizon, and kind of stop them from building their own solutions to the problems that actually everybody has. So this was a very long and winding answer again, but I kind of tried to explain, hopefully, what I have in mind in general. So as I said, I'm not working on a project specifically myself, not something like that I'm contributing to Fresco or anything. So from that perspective, I'd really like to more kind of help those organizations to work together, build the bridges, and so on and so forth. Organizations meaning different communities that are looking at the supply chain topic.
Yeah, so if I understand you correctly, we want to use this SIG as a stage for don't worry, we are working at home. We're working at home. Everybody has some. I have cats, so once in a while you'll see a cat moving around the camera.
Yeah, but a cat is different from. Go ahead. I have. Yeah,
How
you
old
don't.
is he?
Lena, I have witches. See, so and I have an even smaller one, but she's crying downstairs because they kind of get bored. We're waiting for the mother to arrive. She has like a long day today, so I might need to sneak out soon to kind of avoid further escalations.
We are wrapping up, I think. We'll make it shorter today. Don't worry. So, George, don't worry about the kids. Everybody has families, and we are working from home. So, since COVID, it's the new normal, right?
It is, and I kind of like it because it adds a little bit of human touch to meetings.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. On the contrary, if I know that there is a person in my meetings that has, a baby and stuff, bringing onto the meeting, I want to see. I'm such a person. I'm like a mama in my. I'm already a grandma, by the way. So I'm, my material feelings are overwhelming me sometimes. Yeah. So. Back to the topic, I just want to summarize what I understood from you guys, just to say that I'm on the same page as you are. So what you're saying is, let's use this stage to flesh out other SIGs that are working around those kinds of topics, and even commercial products, commercial but based on open source, if I'm not mistaken. If we think that we need to shift to something a little bit, like totally commercial, I'm open to everything that can be, every option for me is there. to collaborate, to generate, do we want to generate some kind of like a documentation on how to adopt supply chain security? Is that something that makes sense to you guys? Or this is too broad topic that it will be a little bit difficult to achieve? What do you think?
So there are documentations made by like the CNCF and so forth that have this kind of purpose in terms of like, okay, what are the best practices? What is the reference architecture for supply chain security and so forth? That's been done already. So I don't think that'd be valuable to do another one.
I agree. But George, do you think differently? The kids. I get that. Oh, she's lovely. How old is she? She's like 5.
Well, lovely. Yeah. Only when you're on the other side of the screen. No, she's 4. Yeah. Right. So totally agree with Path. So there is, so 2 things. First of all, yes, I would like to get some good documentation out that is kind of aligned, I think, with what I kind of hand waved as a goal from my perspective. But again, we should not duplicate any work that has already been done. And to some degree, I may want to kind of focus this down again on creating material that can be used in, also from an OSPO perspective.
What's
and that is
OSPO,
kind
by
of
the way?
Open Source
George?
Program Office. That's like,
Ah.
yeah, I'm sorry. That's like, so our OSPO, well, typically in an open source program office is not doing product development as such, but we kind of oversee how Ericsson uses open source software internally and kind of what we do externally. And so this is why I kind of keep myself a little bit more abstract from product development. But on the other hand, as I said, since we are overseeing how we work with open source software, it is certainly on our agenda to make the entire company more aware also of what's happening outside, because we do see that, especially in large organizations like ours, there's always a tendency to just try to solve things with, let's say, internal approaches. And when you look at supply chain, it's by design a distributed process. You don't solve it well, but just looking at your own company. Good. So that's my OSPO head. And from that perspective, what I'd like to do, as I said, I'd like to look at the materials that are being developed in the various groups. So this group might look at this from a more CD perspective. I'm aware of the white papers that the CNCF has created. That's another source of input. Then the wide range of stuff that the OpenSSF is doing. And then again, I would like to use that to create, in the to-do group context, maybe kind of an overall picture of how these things can fit together. From that perspective, this group would provide some of that input with a CD flavor to, let's say, the overall picture that I'd like to paint. Again, that's just a high-level plan yet. It's not at all fleshed out, but that kind of is why I'd like to listen into what's happening here. So, as I said, I'm probably mostly listening in and trying to wrap my head around the good solutions that are being, like Fresca and others, that are being discussed and presented here.
Just one quick question. What CDE stands for?
CD? Yeah, CI/CD, sorry.
Okay. I've heard CDE. That's why I've asked. Maybe
CDE?
I've
No,
heard...
sorry. Then my pronunciation is just not
No.
on
So
spot.
maybe my hearing was not that good. Okay. Interesting. She is so lovely.
She's bored.
Cute. I know, I can see that. So maybe we can wrap up right now, and maybe we can continue the discussion offline over the Slack channel just to make that a little bit more concrete from me to understand what I can what I can do for you guys if I can. Okay, would that work for you? Are you connected to the Slack channel?
Yes.
Perfect. So let's wrap for today, if that's okay with everybody. And yeah, thank you for attending, even though it wasn't easy for everyone. It was challenging. One was a little bit ill, and one is babysitting his kids. So yeah, but
Awesome.
still, it
Thank
was
you.
for me. It was a valuable meeting. So thank you for attending. I really appreciate that. And see you next time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you.
Thank you. Bye bye.